Friday the 13th movie review. So this is a review of the original Friday the 13th. My history with this movie is, I think, the same as a lot of people's history with this movie. I was fascinated by it as a child. I wasn't allowed to actually watch it, but I was fascinated by the idea of it, I was talking about this on a previous review, and I don't want to repeat myself too much. A previous review being Freddy versus Jason. But children and adolescents have this kind of strange fascination with horror movies for whatever reason. Our parents don't let us watch them, but there's some sort of draw there where we're just kind of fascinated by the concept of horror movies. I was a child in the 80s, so Freddy and Jason were the big ones. I was never allowed to see any of them, but was just kind of fascinated by them and spent hours imagining how scary they would be if I could actually see them. And then as an adult, I rented a few the Nightmare on Elm Street movies and was not terribly impressed, and never really checked out any of the Friday the 13th movies. Or did I? No, I can't remember ever checking any of them out. The first movie, the original Friday the 13th, I had heard from a number of people that it was not that great. So I just never really felt any need to check it out. Although, I mean, it is a classic, isn't it? I mean, it's one of those, a classic of sorts, a classic B movie, but a classic movie nonetheless. My guess, tell me how I do here. My guess is that you've never seen it, whoever you are watching this, because statistically, I think most people actually haven't sat through this movie. Although the sample size is skewed because you clicked on this video. So by clicking on this video, you're obviously a person who's interested in it. So maybe, I don't know, maybe you have seen it. But assuming you haven't seen it, my guess is that even though you haven't seen it, you already know the following. You already know that in the first Friday the 13th movie, it's Jason's mother, not Jason himself, who is the killer. I think, at least for people of my generation, the Scream movies made that little bit of trivia kind of common knowledge. That of course was, that bit of trivia was one of the main plot points? No, one of the main... It was a key part in that infamous first scene in the Scream movie. You already know that it takes place in a campground where Jason's mother is killing off camp counselors one by one. You already know that Kevin Bacon was in this movie before he became famous, and that he had a minor part. And you already know that it had low production standards and is actually pretty tame by today's standards, kind of the violent aspects of it. Yeah, how did I do? Did you know all that already? If you know all that already, maybe there's no real reason to sit through this movie. If left to my own devices, I would not have sat through this movie myself. But I rented Freddy vs. Jason, I watched it, and then my girlfriend at the time, who watched it with me, was interested enough to want to kind of check out the original Friday the 13th movie. These movies are as infamous in Japan as they are back in the United States, at least for people of my age. So we watched it, and I've got to confess, I was bored stiff. I just spent the whole 2 hours just being bored. Maybe this is because it was such an old movie, but it just moves at a slower pace than I was used to. I also had a feeling of having seen it before, although I'm relatively sure I haven't seen it before, but maybe I've seen clips of it before, or maybe parts of it have been parodied before. That being said, this movie does have its fans, and the last time I wrote a review of this movie, I got some pushback from the movie's fans, and maybe I'll get some pushback from the movie's fans as well. So if you can, push back on this nicely, and write down in the comments kind of exactly why I'm wrong, and exactly why you think this movie is actually nice. It is actually good. Why this is actually a good movie.